Thank you for asking me to speak. It's a great honor to speak in front of so many wonderful Vaishnavas. I was very fortunate that I happened to be living in the Boston temple when Srila Prabhupada came. How much time do I have? I'm just wondering. Anyways, I'll just keep speaking, and when you want me to stop, just give me the sign. Srila Prabhupada sent Radha Gopi Ballabha to Boston. There was 3 sets of deities that were identical that got donated to Srila Prabhupada. And one of those is the Chota, the little Radha Madhava in Mayapur. The other one is in Berkeley, the Radha Krishna in Berkeley, and Radha Gopi Ballabha. So Srila Prabhupada personally sent them to Boston. And when they arrived, I don't remember the date, but they came by boat, and Rukmini Devi Dasi and Palika went down to the docks to pick up the deities. And when they got there, they had to fill out some papers. And one of the customs man said, well, how much are they worth? And so Rukmini Mataji said, that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's priceless. You can't put a price on him. So the custom person wrote that down. They're priceless, and he wouldn't give them to them because he thought they were some like valuable, something antique or something coming from India. But they had to come back later and explain, and they got them. And so then they were stored in Boston, and they were preparing for the installation, making outfits. And at one time, I believe it was in May, anyways, there was about 10 of us in the Boston temple that were ready for initiation. I said a talk yesterday, I think it was, about how Boston was the biggest temple in ISKCON when I joined in the fall of 1970. We had 63 devotees. The ISKCON press was here. But in March of 71, ISKCON Press moved to New York. So all of a sudden, we became like a small temple. There was only like 12 devotees in the temple after that. So Satsarupa Maharaj, who was the temple president, he was actually the one who first came to Boston and started the temple in Boston. So he wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada recommending us for first initiation. And in the letter, and I remember when Satsarup got the letter, he read it to all the devotees in the hallway of the Boston temple. There's this picture of Narada Muni over there that used to be in the hallway of the old temple. And I remember he was reading this letter that he got from Prabhupada right in front of that picture of Narada Muni. And it said, I don't remember all the beginning parts, but at the end he said, the devotees that you have recommended for first initiation, I will accept them as my disciples, but tell them to wait because I'll be coming to Boston to install the deities. And they said, and in the meantime, tell them to chant hard. So, and I've looked for this letter in the portfolio or the folio, whatever it's called, but that letter is not there. I don't know what happened to that letter. But we were going around after that. What does it mean to chant hard? How do you chant hard at your japa? So we were all just for, a week, we were really trying to chant hard as we could. Prabhupada told us to chant hard, whatever that meant, enthusiastically, or whatever. But anyway, so he said he was coming in for us to wait. So finally, we got the date that Srila Prabhupada was coming to Boston. And I believe it was July 17th, 18th, and 19th that he was in Boston. I say believe because there's a little controversy. He didn't write any letters from that time. And he was also like in Detroit at the same time on the 17th in the morning, but he was in Boston in the evening. And on the 19th, he was in Boston in the morning, but he was in New York in the evening. But he was here the whole day on the 18th. And, we were fixing up the temple, of course, for Srila Prabhupada to come. And I remember Satsrupa Maharaj, who was very busy all the time with his editing work. He came down to help us paint because we were repainting the whole temple. And I remember the ceiling, it was very dirty, it was white, but it was kind of blackish. So, we were trying to paint it white again. And we were showing Satsrup, how to paint, with the roller. But it needed 2 coats. It wasn't covering it with the first time. So one of the devotees said, you're doing it like this, but it's not the perfection. And Satsrupa immediately said, no, this is the perfection. We're doing this devotional service. So that was his vision. So I told a story about, Prabhupada in coming to the airport. Everybody heard that one when they were there? Tell it again? Yeah. So, when we only had one van, and we all the devotees piled into the van, and we went to Logan Airport, and we got dropped off, and the driver went and parked the van, and we were there waiting for Srila Prabhupada to come. And a lot of devotees had come from, some came from Montreal. Sripati was the president. He brought devotees from Montreal. Sridham from Miami, Florida, drove all the way up to Boston just to see Srila Prabhupada. And devotees were coming from other places. And we were all gathered there. And in those days, you could, just go right into the airport. There wasn't so much security. And we were right at the gate where Prabhupada was coming, and his plane, kind of rolled in. In those days, they, would roll out stairs, and they had to walk down stairs onto the runway and then walk in. So we were having a big kirtan behind the glass, and all these people were coming out. And then finally, Srila Prabhupada, it seemed like he was the last person. He came out, and everybody just went ecstatic, and we just said, Haribo, Haribo. And even though we were behind glass, Srila Prabhupada looked up at us, and smiled. There is a video of this, of Srila Prabhupada getting off the plane. He wasn't the last person getting off, but for years I thought he was, because that's how I had remembered it. But he came into the airport. We brought just a little cushion. Satsrup sat Srila Prabhupada down on this one cushion. They put some garlands on him. He didn't stay there sitting on the cushion for very long. Like I say, there's a lot of pictures of this time. I believe it's in the Boston's website. I also have some on my Facebook page of this whole visit of Srila Prabhupada in 1971. And Srila Prabhupada just started, walking really fast through the airport. We're all kind of trying to keep up, having a kirtan along with them. They had a car waiting for Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada got into the car, and Aravinda, Shyama Sundar, and Karandar were traveling with Srila Prabhupada. Excuse me. And they got in the car, and then the car drove off. And then, we wanted to go with Srila Prabhupada and greet him at the temple and be there at the temple when he got there. But I looked around, and the person who drove the van was like next to me. So thank you. We had to, wait there for him to go get the van out of parking and come back and pick us up. And I was really thinking that, you know how Lord Chaitanya prayed, like one moment is 12 years or more. We were feeling such, separation, finally just seeing Prabhupada, being there. And then all of a sudden he left and we were stuck at the airport. It was actually traumatic for me, and I never went to see Srila Prabhupada in the airport again after that. I would always wait at the temple, and actually, if we have time, I can tell another story about how it actually worked out really good for me. Just 1 second, please. So anyways, one of my services at the Boston Temple was I was like the carpenter handyman, and we had made a new Vyasa-san for Srila Prabhupada. I got to make that. It wasn't so nice, but Srila Prabhupada actually sat on it in the back of the temple. So when we finally got back from the airport, Srila Prabhupada was already sitting on the Vyasa-san. He was already giving his lecture. I remember the temple room was smoky with incense. They must have lit a lot of incense before he came. And he was speaking, and it was just, I remember hearing his voice. It was exactly how I had always heard the tapes, and it was exactly saying the same thing that was in his books, except he was there in person. And by the time we got back, he was just almost at the end of his lecture, and we had fixed up 2 rooms for Srila Prabhupada to use. They were the Brahmachari ashram and a Tulsi room. So all the brahmacharis were moved out, and we were going to sleep in the basement. So we had this one room for Srila Prabhupada. So after he finished speaking, brought Srila Prabhupada into the room. And they were just, Sridham was a temple president from Miami. He came up, he had Sandesh. He gave Srila Prabhupada Sandesh. And they were just, a few hellos. They weren't talking so much. And then Satsrup said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, it's getting late and we've rented a hotel for you." And so Srila Prabhupada's eyes got very big. He said, "A hotel?" He said, "I'm not going." And he quoted a verse, and he said, the country is in the mode of goodness, and the city is in the mode of passion, but a hotel is simply a brothel. I won't go. He said, "But the temple is Vaikuntha. I want to stay in Vaikuntha." And we were so happy. Srila Prabhupada wanted to stay at the temple, even though it was very simple. It was just like a 10 by 12 room. And the idea about this hotel was that this one elderly gentleman who used to visit the temple, this is how I remember it anyways, he convinced Satsrup that the temple wasn't good enough for Srila Prabhupada to stay in. He's Jagat Guru, spiritual master of the whole universe, so you should give him something very nice. So he actually volunteered. He rented the best hotel in Boston, which was the Four Seasons Hotel, the penthouse suite, and the devotees went and cleaned it, top to bottom, put vases with flowers, hang pictures of Krishna on the wall, and they got it all ready for Srila Prabhupada. But Prabhupada didn't go. And, after that, they went and they got out the paintings and the flowers and they brought them back. But Prabhupada just slept for 2 nights on just a simple mat on the floor. And he stayed there. But he was very happy, and we were so happy that he actually wanted to stay there. So the next morning, I told this today that we were all getting ready for the fire sacrifice. One of my jobs was to break up the wood for the fire sacrifice, and we put it in a cardboard box, and it was in the temple. And actually, when Prabhupada came to sit at the sacrifice, they put a cushion in front of the cardboard box, and he was leaning up against this cardboard box, with the broken wood in it for the fire sacrifice. There's pictures of this. But when he went for his morning walk, he just, I wasn't there, but he wanted to go on the morning walk, and he just walked out of the temple, North Beacon Street, and he took a left, walked down about 20 minutes. It was an industrial kind of area. They had like truck repair places along the road. And he just walked chanting japa. He didn't speak much. He talked a little bit about ghosts. The old temple building when ISKCON Press was there, it used to be a funeral home. And it was a little ghostly haunted, but better, it was inhabited by Krishna and the devotees and Srila Prabhupada. So anyways, when he came back and for the sacrifice, he just sat. He only sat on the Vyasasan that one time. The other time, he actually sat in front of where the fire sacrifice was on a pillow on the floor, leaning up against this cardboard box, with the broken wood in it for the fire sacrifice. And he hadn't chanted on our beads yet, so as the fire sacrifice was starting to go, he was chanting japa, and we were all, just however wide the blanket was, and we were sitting opposite him, and Srila Prabhupada was there chanting on japa, chanting on our beads, and then he would hang them on the microphone, so then eventually there was like 10 rows of beads hanging from the microphone. And I told today about how he chanted the prayers from the Brahma Samhita. And it was so wonderful, just, he was reading with his glasses on. And it was I had never heard of the tune before. It wasn't like the one where we greet the deities, but it was something like, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. And he would, but go on, and he chanted all of them so devotionally. And, then he was calling up people to get their names. Somebody asked me about, how I got my name, so I'll tell that. So when Srila Prabhupada called me up to get my name, I paid my obeisances in front of him. I was very nervous, and he asked me, how many rounds do you chant? And I said 16. He said, what are the 4 regulative principles? And I said, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. And I was saying, like, oh, relief, I didn't mess that up anyways. But I was just kneeling on the floor in front of Srila Prabhupada, and he said, so your name is Somadas Das. And he said, Soma means the moon. And I was like looking at the floor, and I was thinking, the moon? I thought we were, supposed to get names of like Krishna Das or something. And he said, so I was thinking, is he making fun of me? And is he gonna reject me? So I was like kind of scared. And when I was growing up, my favorite comic strips, with the Sunday comics was Peanuts. It was Charlie Brown. Americans will remember this. And I remember reading when I was a kid one day, this Charlie Brown is there in the comic strip. Lucy comes in and she says, hey, Charlie Brown, is that your head or is the moon out early? So I thought of this in front of Srila Prabhupada. He said, Soma means the moon, So, but at the same time, I was thinking, is he going to reject me? And so I was kneeling, and I looked up into his face, and he was just effulgent. And all of a sudden, he just did this big smile, and it just, lit up the whole room. And he said, you are moon-like. And then everybody went, Jai. Srila Prabhupada, he can see the soul. He looks right through you, knows everything that you did, but also your potential. So he was very kind. He accepted me, and he gave me my beads. And I actually have pictures of Srila Prabhupada handing me my beads at that time. And the very next devotee was my godbrother Sudas. And when he, same thing, he got called up, asked how many rounds you chant, what are the 4 Rikita principles. And he said, so your name is Sudas. He said, Sudas means very nice servant of Krishna. Do you understand? And he started to hand him his beads. And Sudas shook his head no. And then Prabhupada took the beads back. And he said, do you want to be or don't you? And then he went, yes, and then Prabhupada gave him the beads. And so it was a wonderful time and interesting. I think like 8 out of the 10 people that got initiated that day, their name began with S. we all got names that began with S. So, and then it was the Satsarupa Maharaj did the Abhishek. Srila Prabhupada polished Radharani, and it was such a vivid thing to see Prabhupada sitting on the floor on this cushion, with the cardboard box behind him with the wood, but he was just polishing Radharani, and then he would sit back and look at her, and he would polish some more, and it was like he was right there, with Radharani doing this, and that's, Radha Gopi Vallabha here. And he also dressed them, and one of the little side things is that the dress didn't fit so well, and they had to bring some scissors in and cut it a little bit and pin it. And Prabhupada, put the wigs on, put the crown on, and then they put him on Srila Prabhupada put him on the altar. Where Srila Prabhupada was sitting, the altar was on the left-hand side. And, also, though, there's a few little things. When Srila Prabhupada was in his room, he looked out of the room, and there was this little porch that was the temple room was on the 2nd floor, and that's where Srila Prabhupada was staying. But he could look out the window, and he saw the porch, and it had rained a few nights before, but, from the painting, we had, put some of the paint trays and the paint rollers on the porch. So when Srila Prabhupada looked out, he called Satsarupa over and he said, why are you, wasting all this paint? But he tried to explain, well, that's not just paint. It rained and it's water, but it was all white. But it wasn't so nice. But Srila Prabhupada was very, very observant. And he would always, see these things. And you couldn't really hide anything from Srila Prabhupada. The other thing is where he stayed, and we had the bathrooms only for Srila Prabhupada. But when you'd go down the hallway, the women's bathroom was on the left, the men's on the right, which Prabhupada was using. But there was a third door right in the middle that had been nailed shut a long time ago, but the doorknob was still there. And devotees, when they would go, into the bathroom, they'd always hang their bead bag on the door handle. So Srila Prabhupada saw this, and with Satsarupa was there, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Who has left their beads there crying?" So, wow, and because there were so many other devotees from visiting temples, we had the devotees from Boston that got initiated at the morning. They installed Radha Gopi Vallabha in the morning, but then they decided in the evening to have another sacrifice and have another initiation. So all the other visiting devotees could get initiated personally from Srila Prabhupada. So they had that fire sacrifice. There was a peacock feather fan, and I actually made a long wooden handle so that they could be, fanning Srila Prabhupada while he was sitting there at the fire sacrifice. but somebody was, actually the handle wasn't that nice, but the handle broke actually. And so then they picked it up and they were just holding it by the peacock feathers and they were still fanning Srila Prabhupada. I was just going to say something else about that fire sacrifice in the evening, but I can't remember. Anyways, so those were the 2 fire sacrifices that day. The next morning, when Srila Prabhupada had to go to the airport, again, we all went to the airport. And we all went right in, with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting, on the chair, and everybody else was sitting on the floor around him. And there was this one guest who, he was a photographer. And he actually, some of the videos that are of Srila Prabhupada in Boston in 1971 are made from this this guest. His last name was Sugarman. I can't remember his first name. But there's also a video of Srila Prabhupada sitting in a rocking chair. And at first, Satsvarup Maharaj is asking some questions, but Srila Prabhupada didn't like it so much. And he said, go get somebody else to ask the questions. So he just got one guest who was at the temple. He was a long-haired, hippie. And he started, asking the questions to Srila Prabhupada. And there is... the video of this, and you can see it. And he was asking actually really nice questions, and Prabhupada was responding, sitting in this rocking chair, rocking back and forth, on that second floor of the Boston Temple. But this person who did the videos, and he had a nice big professional camera, and he was taking pictures of Srila Prabhupada, like hundreds of pictures. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting in the airport chair, and he was taking all these pictures, and he was getting closer and closer to Srila Prabhupada, taking close-ups of his face. And Prabhupada went like this to him. And he came a little closer, and Prabhupada took off his garland and put it on him, and he gave him the garland. And, after Prabhupada had left, I went up to him and I said, "How did all those pictures come out?" And he kind of held his head, and he said, "None of them came out. I don't know if I didn't advance the film or I kept the cap on the lens, but there are none of those pictures that he took." But anyways, Prabhupada gave him the garland. And, we were having a kirtan, and then, Srila Prabhupada got on the plane, and we watched him fly away. And that was when Srila Prabhupada came, 1971, to Boston. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
I think the fact that this wonderful temple is here, and it's still here after so many years, it's a testimony to how Krishna was doing everything in this movement. This movement was being carried on by Prabhupada's mercy, because I was 1970, I was 21 years old at the time. How many of you boys and girls are 21 years old or less?
A couple.
Maybe 2 or 3.
21 years old or less.
Would you like to be the president of the temple here? 21 years old?
He's qualified. He's pure devotee of Krishna. Great devotee.
Hare Krishna. But what I'm saying is that Srila Prabhupada, he even said sometime that, Krishna did not send me first-class men. Prabhupada, but we were the proof that Prabhupada was empowered, and he empowered even young boys and girls that had absolutely no experience or qualification. At least myself, I had no experience or qualification. I didn't go to Harvard Business School or business management or anything like that. We were all just young boys and girls who had no experience whatsoever. But the fact that we were able to buy a building like this, have the temple, that's, like I said, that's just Krishna's mercy that he was carrying on this movement. Lord Chaitanya was carrying on this movement despite people like me, devotees like me. And but it was very nice because when I arrived in Boston, what actually happened was that the devotee who had been the president in San Francisco, I had taken over the temple in Berkeley, which is right next to San Francisco. This devotee, his name was Keshava. He had actually started book distribution together with Buddhimanta Prabhu in San Francisco. And he had the very good inspiration that let me take this, because the devotees before that, all around the movement, had no idea for distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. They had not started yet. They had no idea how to do it. So he had the inspiration to let me take this idea to other temples. First he came here to Boston, then he went to New York, then he went to London, then they went to Australia, and that's how book distribution started, like that. So I had been there in San Francisco, and in the beginning of the book distribution revolution, and so I understood, I knew what to do. So that's the main reason he invited me. He called, and there was some problem with the president at that time, and so he called me, why don't you come out and do it? I said, okay. And it was all based on the enthusiasm to distribute Prabhupada's books, because we had finally cracked the secret of how to do it, and it was actually becoming possible. Because before that, all we would do is distribute Back to Godhead magazine, 25 cents. And no one could imagine anything more than that. That anyone could give more than 25 cents. And that they would actually take a big book like that. But they had started it, some inspired devotees under the direction of Keshava Prabhu in San Francisco. They had Buddhimanta, Premarnava, and many others, Yogesh Chandra, many illustrious devotees. And then they began to move out and spread this mission of book distribution, which is Prabhupada's desire, like his spiritual master, Soma Prabhu was saying. If you ever get money, print books, or maybe Prabhupada Maharaj was saying, yeah, Prabhupada Maharaj was saying, if you ever get money, print books. So Prabhupada was printing books, but no one knew what to do with them. No one knew how to distribute them. So somehow or other this broke the ice in San Francisco, and then the second place was here in Boston. So I didn't know what to do. I had no idea of any kind of administration, management, but somehow or other I knew that if we could just all go out and distribute Prabhupada's books, then everything would be okay, everything would work. And Prabhupada told me in the letter when I first started, I sent a letter to him saying that I was here and doing this. And he wrote back saying, just see that the regular program is carried on without fail, Mangalarti, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading the books, chanting Hare Krishna, and then everything will be successful, and distribute books. And he was very pleased, because I said in the first letter, I wrote to him that we are distributing so many books, 5 times more than before. And so he was so pleased. He encouraged us, especially, he said, flood this city of Boston. There's so many young people, so many students. Flood the city with our books, and this will establish the basis of our movement. And we'll be able to continue publishing more and more and more transcendental literature. And like I said, I wasn't here when Srila Prabhupada came. It was so nice to hear from Soma Prabhu when Srila Prabhupada came here. I came after that. Never saw Srila Prabhupada here in Boston. But I think because we took up that mission at one pointedly, we all went out, all the devotees, myself and all the brahmacharis and devotees, we all went out distributing his books. And therefore we were blessed somehow or other. How could 10 young boys and girls buy, on the fanciest street in Boston, such a temple? Now it's worth a fortune. It didn't cost that much those days, but now it's worth a fortune. So that's just a proof that if we just follow Srila Prabhupada's instruction, we don't deviate, we try and go off to other different ideas, but we follow his program. Doesn't mean we can't distribute books in new and different ways. It doesn't mean that we can't preach and try to recruit. He said, recruit some intelligent people from the universities and colleges and train them. He said, train them up to be good preachers of Krishna consciousness. So we can do that, and we may have creative ways to do that. But the goal is that to distribute the books and recruit new devotees who can also take up the mission of spreading Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. And if we do that, then he says it's guaranteed success, guaranteed that we'll be successful in expanding more and more. And that's, I think that's all I can say. But what we would do is we would go down to New York to see Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, at a certain point after his visit in '71, he didn't come here anymore. But he was starting to, he said, we'll go to one central temple, the biggest temple, and then devotees from all on the East Coast, they can come and see him there in New York. In fact, we would go down regularly. Prabhupada would always pass through New York on his world travel, so we would go to see him in New York. And at the time, the president was the devotee who was there this morning, Balimardan Prabhu. He was in charge of the temple. And because Keshava and Buddhimata, they had gone to New York as well, they had started a very, very enthusiastic distribution of Prabhupada's books. So that temple was going very well. And as we know, they purchased a skyscraper after that, so, just by distributing books. Srila Prabhupada's ki jai. Srila Prabhupada's books ki jai.
One of the most sincere devotees who had gone for Sankirtan movement and who had been associated with ISKCON Boston. So I would like to request you, this Dhira Prabhu, to speak something because he's our local devotee, ISKCON Boston. So please kindly share.
He wouldn't speak.
I didn't.
I wasn't expecting, but I'm happy to share. I guess I came to Boston in 1986 at the invitation of Niranjana Swami. I joined in '76 as an 18-year-old boy, and I was very involved in book distribution. Every day, we had what we called the sandwich program. We would have Mangalarti, morning program, Tulsi Puja, Chant Japa, Bhagavatam class, Prasadam, out on book distribution all day. And we had to do at least $100, which in those days was a lot of money. It was hard. It's like $1,000 today or something. And then we would come back in the evening, a little hot milk, a little popcorn, Gora Arti, Bhagavad Gita class. Take rest, and out again the next day. So I did that for 10 years, but after doing it for 10 years as a young boy, I could see that, okay, we managed to get some money out of them and give them a book, but we weren't really cultivating the people that were interested. So I had heard that there was a successful program in Europe where they called it contact Sankirtan. And people that would come to the temple or get a book out on the street, they would take their name and their phone number, address, and follow up with them. People that had shown some little interest, we follow up with them. So I had the desire to do this, and I actually went to Italy to train under Sundarup Maharaj. Tradas was there when I went, '85, and it was an ecstatic program. It was a very nice program they had. So I tried to bring back to this country, and they were, in most places they were like, so you want to replace book distribution with this idea? Forget it, we're not going to do it. It was book distribution. I was distributing sets of books. So, but, you know, there was this idea that if you didn't live in the temple, forget it. You're in Maya. You can't surrender to Krishna. You know what I mean? So that didn't set well with me at all. And I saw that they had these Nam Hatta programs in Europe that was very successful. Trai was actually behind a lot of that. And he's still doing in Bologna, in Italy. So I wanted to bring that here, and it was not without challenges to do so. I actually tried in Washington, D.C. and other places, and they said, you know, okay, you want to do it, go ahead, but we're not going to help you. You're not getting a vehicle, you're not getting any money, you know. Every book you take, you're going to pay for it, you know, kind of thing. And I'm still a kid, I was trying, you know. So I went to Europe and trained, and then I came back, and I went to India to the Mayapur festival in 86, I believe it was. At that time, Sriman Niranjana Swami had just taken sannyas in Mayapur. And I approached him. I said, Maharaj, I've been in Washington all these years distributing books, but I want to develop this contact Sankirtan. I want to develop, not everybody can move in the temple. They need to learn the prayers. They need to learn how to chant Hare Krishna in their house. They need to have pictures in their home. They need to learn how to offer prasadam. They can come to the temple and they can be devotees too. You know, it's not that they're not devotees because they can't be brahmacharis in the temple. So Maharaj said, I already have such a program in Boston. He had developed an entire database with floppy disk computers back in those days. Very slow, but he had developed an entire database. He collected names from the Sunday feast, and he had programs in Warwick, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and Fall River, Massachusetts, up in Nashua, New Hampshire, and up in Maine also. He said, I need somebody to run that program for me. So if you're getting all this feedback where you are, come to Boston, and I want you to take that program over for me. So I said, yes, if you can arrange it with the authorities, because I don't want to just defy the authorities and say go to hell, you know. But if it's okay, I want to do it. I'll come. So I came to Boston. I started developing the program with Niranjana Swami's help. I became membership director of the temple. And we would take Mangalarti sweets. We had nice little boxes of the best sweets in ISKCON. Vitaleshwar Prabhu used to make them. I see Chatamahi confirming. The best sweets you ever tasted. Burfi, pera, sandesh, all these sweets in a box. And I had a big case. They had this set of books in Europe called the Great Classics of India. Bhagavad Gita, First Canto Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and Nectar of Devotion. They were very nicely put together. So I ordered those from Europe. And I carried those in that case. I had a big poster of Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam, which could also be ordered if they wanted. And we started developing, not only working the database Maharaj already had developed, but developing more. He bought a computer for me, and I had my little office with a computer, and we started going out with Jai Gaur Sundar and other devotees. We had that database, and we would, you know, there's a certain number in Roxbury, there's a certain number in Dorchester, there's a certain number in South Boston, and we would go, knock on their door. Because if we called them, they'd make excuse, you know. But when we knocked on their door, 9 times out of 10, they would go, oh, I was wondering when you were going to come. Hare Krishna, come inside. And we would lay it out for them. I would have some beads, japa beads in the bag, and we would teach them, chant Hare Krishna on the beads. They would take a set of books, and we had this program called EFT, Electronic Funds Transfer. And we said, you know, don't concentrate on what you can't do in Krishna consciousness. Do what you can. Give regularly money. So some people would sign up $151 monthly, $20 monthly, and we put their names on plaque outside as members. And we made the life members package. They would always be welcomed in the temple. We had a facility upstairs where they could come and stay with their family if they wanted to. And in this way, we encouraged people. We wanted to encourage them, especially teach them the prayers. So I also want to encourage all you wonderful Boston devotees who have been so accommodating. Thank you very much. I want to encourage you to teach the Americans this stuff too, not only Indians. It's hard for the Americans, but they come here, they think, oh, it's Indian program, I don't fit in. But if you're so kind and welcoming like you have been with us, then they'll also join, you know. So follow up with them, get their name. We told Sankirtan devotees, don't just give them a book, get the donation and leave. They'll throw the book. Get their name and information. If they've given a donation, that purified them to the point where when they see you again, they may be a little curious. They may want to know more. 9 times out of 10, people would tell me, I knew you'd come. I was wondering when you were going to show up. I met old devotees from New York that had met Srila Prabhupada in the streets when he went to Tompkins Square Park and chanted. And he said that same thing. I was wondering when you were going to come. And we would lay it out. They would take a set of the great classics of India. They would take Japamala, and we would teach them the prayers. We had a little newsletter at that time called On the Way to Krishna. So I think it's a very important program. I was not satisfied just to get the donation and give the book. Half the time they're going to throw it away. You know what I mean? I want to make time for the people who are interested in Krishna consciousness. And that means you have to get their information and follow it up. Develop a database, go there, knock on the door, and humbly tell them, I'm here to give you Krishna. And most of the time they'll say, yes, I want to learn more about Krishna. Come inside, sit down. Tell me what you're doing. And we would encourage them to become life members. So the life membership at that time, I think it was, $151 or $199, whatever. They'd get a full set of Srimad Bhagavatam in their home. That's a deity that they can install in their house, you know. So Boston, we tried to develop that program. But of course I had trouble living the brahmachari life here after some time also, and I had to be married, so I married in '91, and then we didn't really fit into the temple here. Make my own way in the world kind of thing. But that was my service in Boston. I became the membership director and tried to help people become Krishna conscious who didn't feel like they fit in to the brahmachari atmosphere of the temple. And there was a lot of people that were very interested in Krishna consciousness, but they couldn't become brahmacharis. So we have to help them, you know. Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Triadas was talking about book distribution beginning in San Francisco, and one of my friends, Jambavan, who you're never going to hear about, he's one of these really quiet people. But he was there in San Francisco in the early days. He drove the BBT truck.
That's where I got to know.
We used to,
Always bring the books.
yeah, he would come to the temples and they would unload the books. The devotees would bring him some prasad and he'd just have to rush off to the next temple. He
was the little brother of Yogesh Chandra, but he wasn't little.
Yeah, he was the younger brother of Yogesh Chandra. Okay, we can get off onto a whole tangent about that. Okay, but first of all, I wanted to talk about the beginning of book distribution in San Francisco. Jambavan was there, and now, too bad, is Triadas already left? He could confirm things, but they said the temple, they had no money, and they were trying to figure out ways to get money. Keshava said he went and bought some cheap incense and some little begging bowls, and they said, just go out on the street, hand people a stick of incense, and ask, can you help us out? And so Buddhimanta said, hey, we've got these books. Like someone had mentioned earlier, there were cases of books. The Krishna book had been printed. Prabhupada sold them
On the Rath Yatra day, when they first arrived, he just held them up. Who wants to buy one? And of course, everybody wanted to buy one from Prabhupada. There were only a dozen of them in the box that day. But now they had cases and cases of them. They tried putting them in bookstores. They just weren't selling. And now they were like in a bind. We need money. We got to pay the rent. Buddhimanta said, can we try selling these books? Keshava said, sell anything you want. We got to pay the rent. So Buddhimanta took them out. And as somebody said, well, first he took it out on the street while they were chanting. Somebody bought one. He took them out again the next day. Somebody else bought a Krishna book. The next day, 2 books. They were onto something. That was a big deal, selling great big Krishna book. The books are like that big. There's 2 of them in a set, shiny silver with the picture of Krishna on the cover. Then Buddhimanta started going door to door, and as somebody said, he would knock on the door and just get down on his knees and say, please, look at this book. Jambavan said, in those days, you could go and knock on someone's door, and you knock on the door, and they'd be in the house, and they'd just shout, it's open, come on in. And people were really friendly. So they'd walk in with the books. He said the hard part was not getting in the door. The hard part was leaving, because people were fascinated. Like, what are you guys about? Have a glass of water, have some cookies, have some snacks. And they wouldn't let you go. So they were selling books. They went all over San Francisco. They went all over the Bay Area. Then they got into a van. It was a great big step van. I don't think they make those anymore, but it was a great big, like a delivery van, like the UPS trucks. Who was on that? I think it was Jayananda, Sridhar that was in Bombay, a couple of others, and Jambavan. And they went on the first traveling Sankirtan party. And they went further south. They ended up in Arizona, and people called the police on them. They thought they were aliens because they'd never seen anyone dressed like this. Really, they thought like somebody from another planet. So the police took them into the station, and the chief of police was in there, and they made their presentation, and Sridhar, who became Swami later on, what was his name before he was initiated? Whatever it was, he wasn't initiated then, but he just spoke so eloquently, and he said, and on behalf of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we would like to present the chief of police of this town with one of our books. And because he did it so eloquently, he was flattered and like, oh, okay, this is a cultural thing. And so Sridhar Swami, he was always like that. Anyway, those of you that know him, he passed on, 10 years ago. So those were the early days of book distribution in Bay Area, San Francisco, and then Treyadas learned there, came to Boston. It was really something. Rameshwar Swami gave a presentation about how poor the movement was in the late 60s. ISKCON Press, he talked about this series of letters where Prabhupada's writing back and forth. They're going to get this printing machine, and Prabhupada's trying to negotiate the price, bringing it down $200. He spends about 9 months back and forth, like just fighting over $200. Finally they get it, and then they start the printing. But then by the early 70s, when book distribution starts to happen, then he's going through this whole thing, how now the BBT has enough money, they're able to print these other books. The BBT now has a surplus of money, and he's making loans to the other temples. When they want to purchase a temple or some other large purchase, he'd loan it out at 10%, And so now he's got surplus money, he's making 10% income, it's helping the society. And we asked, well, how responsible were they at paying those loans back? And Rameshwar said, yeah, I was there. Everyone took it so seriously. We had to pay these loans back. So he was making 10% on the loans, the books, and every year it was doubling. And so now he's loaning out like $1 million to some projects. It just grew and grew. Okay, one more totally different topic. Since we're talking about Jaladuta arriving in Boston, I got to meet Sali Agarwal, and we sat with her. Bhakti Marg Swami asked her, what was it like being married to an Indian man in the late 50s? Sali Agarwal said, there could not have been anything more strange than that in Pennsylvania. And so then he asked, how did you meet him? And you guys ready for this story? And while she was telling the story, we were listening, and she's such a good storyteller. We were like sitting on the edge of our seats, like, you gotta meet him, because if you don't meet him, we don't get Srila Prabhupada, because it was because of her being an American citizen that her husband could sponsor Prabhupada to come here. So there was a dance, and somebody asked, we have this man, he needs a partner to go to the dance. He's from India, would you mind? And she thought, well, okay. And it was weird. There were no Indian people in America at that time. They danced, they were friendly, they chatted a little bit, and then like, okay. And then the next week there was another dance, and he asked, could you be my partner again? And I said, okay. And so that went on. There were a few meetings like that, and then he had to go back to his family in Agra. And she said, in those days we didn't express our feelings so much. And I was wondering if he felt the same way about me that I felt about him. So he was in Agra for a whole year, and they were writing letters back and forth, but it was never direct. You know, like how I'm feeling and what do we want to do. And so she was always, there was this tension as she told the story. And then finally, he sent a letter, I'll be coming, I'll be on this ship, we estimate we'll be here at this time. So she was reading the papers every day. When is that ship coming into the harbor? Finally, it appeared in the harbor on the paper. He called her up. Hello, is this Sally? She forgot totally about his accent because they'd just been writing. And anyway, they got together, they put on the record, and they started dancing. And then he said, yes, let's do this. And she said yes. And then they got married. And then she, as she explained the story, her husband's father was always doing these different kinds of schemes. You guys live in America, that's an opportunity. Maybe we can do something that will bring some money and credit to the family. And there were other sadhus that he wanted them to sponsor, and nothing ever came from it. But then, so they filled out the form, and then they got the letter from Prabhupada saying, yes, I'll be coming. And she looked at the picture and she said, it was the most ugly person I'd ever seen. She saw that picture on the passport photo, and they were scared. This person's coming to our little place. But as we saw in the movie that Jadubar said, she fell in love with him. When they put him on the bus, she cried, thinking, how's he going to fare in New York? So I think we have to end here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.